Okay, good night, everyone. First of all, dear participants, and also people who have maybe joined us. I don't see, I don't know if someone has joined us yet, but if so, good evening to you also. And my name is Elina. I'm a curator of educational program for Riga Photography Biennale, and I welcome you all to the discussion on topic contemporary culture, festivals and urban development, which is one of the events of Riga Photography Biennale and was supposed to happen actually in spring, but due to well-known circumstances has migrated to here and now, this beautiful time of early autumn. Before I give limelight to the moderator of the discussion, Jonas, I wanted to wish all of us a good and a valuable time tonight. And also wanted to say that there is a chat section. If any of the people who would watch us have some comments or questions during the conversation, you're welcome to leave them there, and we'll try to follow up and integrate them in the conversation as good as we can. So yes, have a good time, and Jonas, Rachel, the light is yours. Where is Jonas?
And visible, and everybody is interested. And everybody is interested to join us. So first of all, a warm welcome and to all once again. I will shortly a little bit introduce them afterwards, but I will actually real introduction to themselves afterwards. But I would first of all really like to thank the Riga Photographic Biennale, especially this kind of, since it is for me personal, of culture and of urban development. And I think the selected persons here in the discussion round are actually really pretty much those who are at the forefront of that, what is happening. Is it in Latvia, or is it in Poland, in Estonia, even in Germany, or myself right now being here in Finland. So for the beginning, I would like to actually shortly introduce whom we have with us tonight. So first of all, big thanks to Elina, who sent all of this up and who collected the team, who has curated all of this, and who's really has been very, very, very from an actual event, a physical event, now today into this mode that we're in here in a digital format. And then we have with us tonight from Latvia, but being currently in Berlin, Lian Jorgelane, who is a cultural manager and cultural curator and a very active person in Riga, and while also in other places in Europe. Then Inga Lace from a very, 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 how to say, inspiring institute organization in Riga, who has been working a lot with the survival kit and with other issues all around the connection between arts and urban development, which is, to my mind, one of the first real recognizable things that has been done in Latvia, minimum, by the survival kit team, better to say, by the Contemporary Art Center. They have Kadri Lind from Estonia, who is right now is understood in Tartu, and very, very actively involved in also urban outdoor street festivals, and who also, as I understood, right now in Tartu, in order to prepare also for the upcoming, still 3 years or 4 years actually, the upcoming European Capital of Culture. In Warsaw right now, and herself also a curator and working a lot as well in the cross-section between arts and culture and urban development. And last but not least, besides my city council, better to say the development department of Riga, no, actually anymore how long, but I would say like I know him for like really 15 years, and as long as that, he has been very dealing with communities and with culture and with promoting the idea of a stronger community. As to say, I'm a lost German somewhere in the Baltic states, and currently in this moment I'm sitting in Finland because of an urban cultural project which I'm participating here in Pori. And usually I'm also the director or co-director of the Urban Institute in Riga, and I kind of have been dealing in the last approximately 18 years in Riga with the idea of how do we actually bring social and cultural planning together with any idea of the urban development that we're looking for. Tonight, and I think the description that has been done by Elena is really pretty exact and pretty much hitting the point. We want to focus on some aspects of the way how we are actually dealing with subject. So it is probably not only the development, but it's the general idea of the urbanity, this kind of construction that we have, that we are living in. This, I'm saying construction because I mean, we humans, we are developing it and we are like making, so it is us who is like actually doing it. And it is us who are the persons who are actually in the end of the day also responsible for what we are doing there. And we in the last years more and more have learned that actually arts and culture are pretty good promoters for an interesting development that is not only serving humans, but probably also a better environment and nature and other issues. That said, we have many subjects today that we want to tackle, but I think most of all and most important for the moment would that we are like focusing on the introduction of our participants. So I would like to really invite you to shortly tell us who you are and what you are generally doing. But that should be like a very short moment, because afterwards it will be far more interesting to hear from you, approximately not longer than 5 minutes from each of you, to understand what you are doing in this moment exactly in actual work that is relating to this subject. Are you dealing with any kind of cultural program? Are you dealing with any kind of festival? Are you involved in any kind of artistic perception or work with urbanity? And that would give us a first really, like, I hope, very interesting round to see how you are all related to the subjects. So for the beginning, I would say, let's start in the way that I also introduced you. Maybe let's start with Liana, and I would like to give you the word now, Liana.
Thank you, Jonas, for welcoming and creating the space, and Elena, and hi again to those who I see and those who I don't see behind the screen. I'm Liane. I am co-running educational and consultancy collective New Visions, and we work primarily with arts institutions and also cultural practitioners as individuals, consulting around questions of social justice, equity, inclusion, thinking of how to promote more different narratives of leadership, thinking about collective leadership, about transformational leadership, and also what's the role of arts in social movements and social justice movements. So we do workshops and consultancy and mentor women who work in the field of arts and culture. And more directly linked to this topic of today is, even though I'm now based and work from Berlin, I'm also, since the last 5 years, co-organizer of a festival in Riga called Kometa. It's a cultural festival that kind of fuses together both learning, music, performance, art, and is happening on an island, the fortress of Daugavgrīva in Riga. And with that, over the years, we're also thinking of how this festival can be not just another festival for consuming certain cultural content, but also bring up questions that we find important. and show a way how this festival can become an experimental space of how else we could be together, how could we make events if we take into account not just the needs of humans, but also the needs of planet Earth, and how to do it in a way that is sustainable and healthy for all our relationships, human and non-human, and more than human. So that's the position that I'm entering here this conversation with.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Inga Late, and thank you for the introduction and for organizing this event. And just to say, I'm a curator at the Latvian Center for Contemporary Art, and also currently a CMAP Fellow of Central and Eastern Europe, focusing on the Baltic countries at MoMA in New York, which I'm doing remotely from the Baltics. Yeah, so this one task is for me to somehow bring all these processes that happen in the Baltics to the knowledge of MoMA. But since 2012, I've been working in the Latvian Center for Contemporary Art, and also since that year, I've been involved in the Contemporary Art Festival Survival Kit, which is one of the main projects organized by the Latvian Center for Contemporary Art. And and Survival Kit has been this project which kind of started in 2009 as a reaction to economic crisis, when so many buildings got empty out of the, going bankrupt, like shops were bankrupt, and the streets looked quite sad. And also there was, I think income collapsed for people, and budget of culture was cut tremendously. And at that moment, colleagues of mine, which I didn't work with at the time, and Solvita Krese, the founder of the festival, they decided that something should be done, and together with the artists, they founded this festival under the name Survival Kit, somehow thinking but what could art and culture give to the society at the time of Great Depression and Great Crisis? And so what it became was really this kind of several week pop-up interventions in this empty shops, in empty spaces, serving kitchens or workshops for participation. And it was spread all over the city. And then more or less every year it kind of focused on a bit of different area. And that has kind of also stayed with the festival, that every year it somehow chooses a different place. And if before, in the first years, it was these kind of creative clusters or creative quarters in the city. So I would say the festivals sort of co-developed together with those quarters, and then one, developing the other. And somehow, one, encouraging the development of the other. And at the same time, a very similar, or promoting, or being platform for collaboration. And at the same time having artists' works and events, and always exploring sort of pressing issues in society. So somehow having these political themes or themes that are current at the time, be it ecological or, I don't know, related to revolutions or protests. There's always, or this year it was security. So that's kind of, so it grew together with those creative clusters in the cities. And another initiative that came sort of out of it, or that was somehow co-authored by Survival Kit, was the Free Riga movement, which is another sustainable initiative now, an NGO basically, which is dealing with the fact, or it also started more like an activist project, and it's dealing with the fact of how to work with those buildings that are in Riga city, and in collaboration with the Riga City Council or the owners, how to make them inhabitable, because there are a lot of spaces in Riga that are empty, and there are a lot of creative people that maybe need space, and that, processes of someone inhabiting the space may somehow, make the environment somehow also better or more creative or more lively. And basically, this year is already the 11th edition of the festival, which is, I think, quite important. And we are, still open until the 4th of October. And maybe another thing that worth mentioning is that we're thinking already to work on the book, like to look at the decade, like the last decade, through the prism of Survival Kit, and both to see this kind of urban development, like where Survival Kit has been and what has happened to those places afterwards, because it's interesting to see that as a documentation, right? And also to see what has changed in the art world, in the art processes, and in the world, you know, in general terms. So it would be like a crazy, huge book to cover all of those issues, I think. But maybe more we can cover in the discussion, I think.
Thank you very much, Inga. Sorry. The main point, I just wanted to shortly reflect on that, because being myself involved for 2-3 years in the Survival Kit and co-founding also the Free Riga movement, I mean, this kind of book that you are talking there about, that would be like an essential, really point of, I think, documenting serious contemporary Latvian history. And I really mean it's not art, but it's really far more than that. It's real Latvian history, because it has changed the city tremendously. That is for sure. Nice to hear that. Very good point. So, Kadri, please, it's your floor.
Hello, happy to talk to you all. Greetings from Tartu. For the past 7 years, I've been working here. I'm not from Tartu, but I moved here because I went to the university and I kind of stayed here. And today I'm mainly focusing on urban festival Uit, but I'm also organizing street art festival Sensibility. And I'm, in both cases, I'm one of the main organizers, and I'm also the curator of the artistic program. But when I started thinking why we started the urban festival Uit, then it was mainly because we were really bored in Tartu. We had just graduated university, and it's an initiative of a couple of friends who just were yearning for more alternative locations for events. So for the past 7 years, we have mainly been doing that, because Uit is interdisciplinary, which means that we have performances, we even do games for kids. We were camping in the city park this last year. We're doing alternative tours. We're doing sound and light installations. We're basically doing everything that's in public space, plus also some private spaces, but they always have to be kind of alternative. So mainly we're doing a lot of location scouting, and we're collaborating a lot with private owners, actually, because most of the locations are owned by locals, and we're in contact with them. We're asking for the permissions. We're really getting to know them really well. So for ourselves, one of the missions has always been to actually get to know the local people also, not only our audience, but just everyone who lives in Tartu, because living in such a small town, which is 100,000 people, sometimes you have the feeling that you already know all the people, you already know all the places. So we're constantly trying to prove to ourselves that this town is actually a lot bigger than it seems to be. And of course, we are mainly designing the events for the local people. So we're really going for the individuals in the city, and we're trying to offer a fresh, new perspective of their own hometown.
Thanks a lot, Kadri. I think that specifically looking on the situation that Tartu has been winning last year, the bid for the capital of culture, and all of that, what will come up out of that, and all the challenges and all the empowerment, whatever it is, it will be definitely both as, is really for us all, I think, very, very important within the Baltic states, definitely to look upon, because beyond the idea of capital of cultures before in the Baltic states, which we have had Vilnius, Riga and Tallinn, We are the first time facing actually a town slash a city that actually is not of this capital dimension and has an enormous importance within Estonia and the Baltic states, definitely as a university, and but nevertheless it has a different scale, and I think that will be for us all a very important learning process. So I'm really looking forward to these experiences that we can gain out of that. Now I'm actually switching to Poland, so I would like to welcome Marta. Marta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jonas. Thank you, Alina, and I'm so happy to be here. So I'll just try to introduce very briefly what the institution I'm representing is, named Biennale Warszawa, meaning Warsaw Biennial, but we don't translate the name of the institution into English. It was created in the late 2017, and it was created as an interdisciplinary hub working in a continuous manner. And this is the important feature of the institution, which is not working in this festival mode of activities, which I find, I guess, most interesting when we talk about us in the whole festival sector, let's say. It's an institution of a distinct socio-political profile, and this is another important feature. It integrates artistic ideas with research, discursive and publishing activity. And this research component is like a component of nearly all of our activities, which might be also interesting in talking about the city itself and mapping the city itself. What we do is like we're kind of hacking the format of the biennial as it is widely understood. We work in like 2-year programming cycles, and the main emphasis on our activities is really on the long-term ongoing activities. And the biennial itself, the festival, let's say itself, is like a summary of the long-term activities we were conducting. Not just a separate large-scale event that's like popping up out of a sudden. So this is something that was very important for us when creating the institution. The project I would like to tell you about, like a project that was conducted when we started our activities in 2018, was mapping the city of Warsaw, doing it as a research project conducted together with the INURA network of researchers and activists. INURA is the International Network for Urban Research and Action. So we made together with the experts in the fields of economics, demography, social policy, environmental studies, anthropology, sociology. We made a map of Warsaw with like different layers showing like mapping the inequalities, the areas of extreme poverty and extreme wealth, which in Warsaw are very specific because they are being a mosaic, not like large distinct areas, but a mosaic of small areas. The gentrification areas, the areas of environmental degradation, the areas of failed investments because of the 2008 crisis, which was very visible these days, the displacement areas, but also the areas where social dynamics of self-organization processes were very much visible. And during the first edition of the biennial, which was held in 2019 under the title "Let's Organize Our Future," the map was supplemented by another layer, like showing you the multicultural Warsaw. And this multicultural layer was something we were working with when designing the program of the biennial, where we're working with the big Ukrainian community, because I don't know if you're aware of the fact that the Ukrainian migration to Poland is one of the largest waves of migrations these days. So we were using the data of the map in order to create the projects some of them being artistic projects, some of them like being the projects at the intersection of research and activism and arts. Yeah, so maybe that's it for now. Of course, the biennial itself was much a bigger event, but I don't want to take too much time.
Okay, thank you very much, Marta. It sounds really like very packed, very full, very, very interesting indeed, especially in a very vibrant spot like Warsaw. I can imagine it's really like an enormous work also, what you're like doing there. So last but not least, I would like to give the word to Lukas in Riga. Lukas, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks, Jonas. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Elina and Photographic Biennale team for opportunity to be here in this interesting discussion. Maybe I'm farthest from the art as other participants. I'm mostly dealing with planning issues in City Council for more than 2 decades. And yes, mostly dealing with city strategy, different development programs and other stuff regarding to city development. But I'm working with different challenges as well. For instance, promoting neighborhood platform in the city, dealing with metropolitan area, and I'm involving my team in different projects. And one of them is urban cultural planning, as Liene and Jonas participate as well. And urban cultural planning is project when planning is as a method of urban social innovation. We try to destroy borders between culture and planning, and where artists are community drivers. And this is very, very, I think, important, and this emphasizes my interest as an urban planner and strategist, how culture can impact urban and social environment in the city. This is probably why I'm here in this discussion as a strategist and urbanist.
Thanks a lot, Lukas. It was an excellent, actually, to be honest, an excellent overview. The first time that I have heard it so crunchy, so short, so clear about our current project. I would be happy I would manage that. That is really, for us, always a challenge, because thinking about the idea of this discussion, my first spontaneous moment of recognition of that, what we're all doing, was that I had like the question in my head, the festivals that we are dealing with, are they festivals in the character of a Cometa festival, what Liene is representing as a, say, shorter term festival, which has an enormous impact in this very specific area, or is it a long-term process, like even as I understood, or we understood from Marta, hacking a biennale and really like understanding it as a 2 years program in as such, which I find very intriguing actually, is or are these festivals actually a challenge or a fortune? This is what comes to my mind, because when I'm looking on let's take once the side of the person and of the community and the interests that are probably beyond that, what we in culture, in arts, in sustainable urban development, in alternative methodology are usually thinking about. Is there maybe also a point where I would call it like now, the average customer says that, why do we have now immediately to break the border between arts and planning? And what is the benefit? I mean, where is actually the benefit for the cultural work and the artist on the one hand, and where's the benefit for the environment, including society and everything else that makes an environment? So I think that the challenge or the fortune, because we have heard during last 10 years within the European Capital of Culture movement, and all those who are taking part there and who are involved. As well as on other stages,
Jonas, you're getting
and on
slow.
other festivals as taking place all around Europe, that challenge getting that it starts to be really difficult to whether we are actually dealing for the better good of that specific area and territory we are talking about in the community, or we are actually challenging this community and this city or this community. So I would really be interested to hear from you. All of you are in the one or the other hand connected with a festival, with a big cultural or artistic program, with actually steering the urban development and those festivals connected to it. How do you feel? Not only think and rationally like reflect on that, but also how do you feel about it? What do you think are our opportunities in this moment? Should we continue or should we actually hold in? And I would really like to tell you that many of those former European Capital of Cultures have had real moments of struggle where they understood maybe we have really stepped over a certain kind of invisible line that was not healthy anymore for our communities. So far from me, and this like first subject that I want to throw a little bit inside. So how do you think about that? And please, whoever serves or wants to speak first, serves first. It's up to you.
Yeah, maybe I can start and somehow also thinking about like Survival Kit Festival. It's interesting that it's also part of yeah, like the program of Latvian Center for Contemporary Art. So in terms of how we work, of course, it is this 1 month festival that usually takes place in September for 1 month. And it's essentially a contemporary art exhibition at the basis of it. And then, you know, like the events, the program comes around it. And yeah, and somehow it became an exhibition more than anything else, like over the years, like, because before I think it had more diverse formats, let's say. And but what is still I think important is, yeah, that it's part of a discourse or series of events that we're developing. So for instance, we would collaborate maybe with some curators and talk about like outlands and migration, and you know, within the Survival Kit Festival, but at the same time, and those would be like new works or new commissions, and at the same time we also have been like researching Baltic exile after the Second World War in a different project. So these themes of migration somehow come together, and I guess people who are in the city, they would hear from us like either in the National Art Museum, where a museum exhibition takes place, which is not part of the festival, right? But at the same time, then in September, they would come to Survival Kit and they would see that same theme of migration, inclusion, and exclusion, you know, like in a different way, and from different artists and within different, yeah, like discussions. But why I think somehow I'm not so much like against, I mean, there are certain side effects of festivalization or biennialization, but there is this one thing, I guess, or several things which are still, I think, important. And that is like this possibility of experimentation and also of like reacting towards like some changes in society more quickly, because indeed it's like when the museum exhibitions are to be planned or 2, 3, 4 years in advance, it depends on the museum and on the city. Then the festival, which happens every year, of course, it may be exhausting for the organizers, but also it has this chance to like react rather quickly, at least with the public programs. And there is this idea of like experimentation and also like trying and failing within like how do you want to, you know, include your community, what do you want to do artistically, and it's kind of, I think, still a space reserved for diversity and for ideas that are uncomfortable. For instance, in a society that you know, like is largely turning towards nationalist attitudes, but maybe is still not like in a very serious kind of, you know, condition with that, I would say, like Latvia. Like still it like more than any other place, like still can talk about margins, can talk about you know, inclusion, exclusion, all these mechanisms that are sometimes not so much talked about everywhere else. And that, you know, so I would still say that these are very kind of valuable spaces.
Thank you a lot. I think, Kari, that was already, Inga, sorry, once again, was a very, very important point, specifically like looking on the character of experiment. I think that is really something that we have to have in mind a little bit further on for the next hour. I would actually very much like to ask Liana as like reflecting as the next one, specifically also thinking about the situation of Kometa and the 5 years experience that you have so far in connection also to the neighboring communities, just for those who are not from Riga, Daugavpils and Bolderdaya, to quite very much like set out communities. Liana?
Yes, you just got stuck there a little bit, so I was not sure if you ended.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah, I was thinking about what you brought up, kind of the questions and topics, and it just sparked a lot of reflection. And I think that's also the biggest point with Kometa for me, is this learning curve over 5 years, and which brings up a lot of questions, thinking about this. Okay, is there a boundary between arts and culture and urban planning, or should there be one? What it is, if it is. The reflections that are kind of going in me is one thing about, and I was also coming up this notion of experiment, and I'm still thinking, there was a couple of years ago on Homo Novus Festival, Daniel Blanca-Guba was a curator, was bringing this up, that festivals, doesn't matter if it's like just a 3-day festival or 2-year festival, they're still somehow framed in certain time and space, and kind of this framing allows to experiment and try out things which are not maybe possible in the, so to say, normal world. So it becomes this kind of exception from the norm, and it allows you to test what other kind of relationships there could be, how could we create this space, and in that sense it also leaves some effect on the outside. But I think what has for me been the biggest learning moment through Kometa is also getting away from this arrogance of how, or like not over exaggerating our influence as cultural practitioners on the social and on the urban. And I think like having the expectations, yeah, somehow not taking all of the changes as a direct result of what we are doing. Of course, there's some replications whenever you start moving in a certain space, and but the changes that happen are not necessarily just a direct outcome of what you were doing. It activates also some other processes. And also in the case of Kometa, there's always these difficult questions of who actually needs this, what we are doing there. And we can try to pretend that everyone in the district needs that. And that's just not simply true. And we see that also. On the other hand, there's a certain amount of people who are needing the activities that we are doing and how the festival is happening. And it shows a sense of possibility, what can happen to an empty space, as the Daugavpils fortress is and has been largely neglected for decades there, forgotten by society. I mean, I grew up in Riga, and even I only got to know about this place years ago, which on one hand can test to my ignorance. On the other hand, it also, I mean, it shows something, and there are quite many people like this, because it is somehow further out there for those of us living and practicing in the city center. I was thinking something about, I think that's kind of for me the main point, that I think it is important that festivals exist, and they create this kind of a space for experiments and testing of what else could be happening, and also point to the pain points in society and the area around, if you're talking about urban contexts specifically. On the other hand, also not thinking too much of oneself or what the impact is there, and being kind of humble also to the local realities and listening to critical feedback. And I think that's what we're learning through the Cometa years more and more, to actually go out and talk to people and see how it's resonating in the communities around. And then having patience also, that if there is any chance change to happen, it doesn't happen overnight. Like it's mental images that require change on both sides. And yeah, that's kind of my 5 cents. Oh no, and maybe one last thing, since I still have the floor, is also about that's for my personal reflections, but also as being the core team of Cometa, is that it's very important that festivals also don't become this space where it's just about the outside and thinking of, okay, what do we show to the people who come to the festival? How do we talk about ourselves? But you actually practice what you are preaching within the organization itself. And that's maybe more from my consulting position, but I've seen so many amazing cultural initiatives which are kind of advocating for justice, for thinking about, okay, how do we challenge capitalism and all these ideas behind it. At the same time, what's happening internally and in the relationships between people is quite toxic and quite internalized. And so it's also, I think, about thinking how the festival itself as a way can challenge these things that it kind of wants to point out to the society or in the outside.
Thank you, Leona. I think that we are like already starting a little bit when I'm listening to you, and before Inga, we are already like starting a little bit to focus and to concentrate on certain kind of aspects, which in a way I expected a little bit, because we are close to each other in terms of not only that some of us know each other, but also in terms of our work. In the same time, I'm really curious also to probably hear in this moment how Guntas, how you are like actually reacting on that. Probably we would always usually think, as you said yourself, like being the one who's at the most distance to the classic arts and festival and so on, sitting as a responsible person in a city development department. But I think you also have, exactly because of that, a very valuable reflection opportunity, and you are one of those who really has been like for more than 2 decades like dealing with it. I mean, that is something that I think is also like a possibility to look back for you that most of us don't have in this respect. Guntas, what do you think?
Yes, I actually agree with Inga and Leon, is that festivals is not only festivals for these days when they are happening. A lot of surrounding events is very important if we compare contemporary art festivals with classical festivals. For instance, different summer schools and workshops, it's regarding against racism, support equality and tolerance and democracy. And this is for sustainability of society in the city. It is very, very welcome from my point of view, I think. We can remember, for instance, Leona's Cometa key principles that we dare to think that humans can be more than consumers and polluters in this planet. Yes, Leona, and this is, I think, is very, very important. Second aspect, what I think it is in contemporary art festivals, attendance is more like participants, not like viewers, if we compare with classical festivals. And this is again about inclusiveness of society, inclusiveness of neighborhood communities. That is, for me, it's very important. Therefore, in this project, UCP, Cultural Planning, we are dealing that and promoting that artists can be community drivers. And it's again total difference if we compare, for instance, creative quarters in 90s, where artists are make communities like close communities by themselves, and now is more open and to invite people to participate here. And this is, I think it's very important difference between creative quarters in 90s and nowadays. Actually, Mats from Institute XX from Denmark said that in Riga he can feel now Berlin vibes from 90s now. I don't know, is it true? I really like Berlin, and it was a very big compliment for me as who work for the Riga City Council. Of course, it's not because of me. It's actually the best thing. It's not top-down things. It is bottom-up things, and it's again place of the culture in new development area or in old development area. It's about gentrification, about revitalization, and about identity. This is maybe for me, yeah, important. Ganas,
the idea. Thank you. Yeah. Being the Berlin of the 90s is indeed quite appealing. I mean, I lived myself in the 90s in Berlin, and I have to say I got this feeling actually when I arrived in Riga in 2001. I had more the feeling then that it's like the Berlin of the 90s, because it really showed a certain kind of yeah, how do we call that? Is it really freedom, or is it just like that? What also already the other speakers have been talking about, this kind of space that allows us to experiment and to do something. Certainly nowadays in Riga, we are focusing very much also on the idea of what actually we are and to which extent we are dealing with all of this. I would like very much now to ask Kadri, facing this ECOC, the European Capital of Culture in 2024, and Tatu, what are your thoughts about this character of festival, and where do you stand with your personal work, but also probably with your personal opinion? Also, that is not unimportant.
Sorry, I didn't hear the beginning. You were also, I heard the ending, but the beginning was connected to the European Capital of Culture, or what was the question again?
Yeah, I was asking Kadri, how do you feel about this situation that we are discussing right now? How do you feel about it in terms of looking 3 years, 4 years forwards to the Capital of Culture in 2024 in Tartu? What comes to your mind in that moment?
It's in a way, it's a very difficult question because, for example, wheat is not in the program of the European Capital of Culture. So we decided not to, but we're doing, probably we're doing quite a lot of collaborations with other projects. And in a way it was a conscious choice because, I don't know, we like to keep our scale a bit smaller, and we don't want to force it at all, because we're using a lot of alternative spaces, which are usually quite small. So we're not that interested in like scaling the audience a lot. Like we like it small because then it's also much more intimate. So I'm quite optimistic when it comes to festivals, but I think it also depends on what sort of festival are you doing and what's your aim in organizing. I'm in many points, I totally agree with Liena in the sense that the change is very slow. Also, when you're asking about like how the festivals might impact the public space and the locals, then I've been working 7 years now with the local people, And I can see that the change is happening, like in their heads mostly, like the way they see public space is changing, but it takes a lot of time, and you never know if the change comes, is it like the impact like connected to you or not. So I've been seeing some changes in the city. For example, we have more community gardens now, and for example, the first ever project we did, it was even before WIT, actually. It was the summer before the actual festival, was a community garden. It was like the very first community garden in Tartu. And like we have a lot of community gardens now, but I wouldn't like to think that it's directly connected to ours, like because cities change anyway, so like it happens. But when it comes to the model of the festival, then I really like it, because in our case we are trying to create like those positive emotions and events and environments. And our aim is that once you're inside of this environment, the site-specific work, for example, like an installation in public space, then you kind of start looking public space in a different way, that you kind of try and think more about the alternatives, like what can we do in public space, like why is everything like it is. And since I did my master's thesis about my own festival, because I really wanted to know, like, is there a point of continuing? Like, is there something happening, changing in people's heads? Then I did quite a lot of interviews, and I understood that actually it is working. It is working. People are really opening up in dreaming about what their public space should be more like. And really thinking that, oh, I can see an abandoned building here. What should it be like? What would I like it to be? And I never had such discussions before. So I'm optimistic about the festival format, actually. It's short and it's like kicks well.
That sounds really good, Kari. What I really loved a lot when you mentioned now the dreaming. Because I think we are getting a little bit away from these usual suspects. We are coming towards something which is very deep-rooted, emotional, something that is really dealing with all of us humans, whether we are connected with the idea of encountering public space, or if we're dealing with arts or not, and if we can read an urban planning or we can't read it, but we are all dreaming. And dreams are very environmental, as we know. And this I think is really like a very important touch point. Thank you for that. So Marta, I'm really interested how specifically also in the very, let's say it very honestly, in the very difficult political situation that you are in Poland, and the situation that you are dealing with in Warsaw, in your Biennale, that you said yourself that you are like cracking down to its like, or like shatter it down to its like pieces, that actually something is happening for 2 years and not just so and it really gives like some kind of feel like somewhere, and sometimes it's really interesting.
Jonas, you are like disappearing into space for some seconds. Now you're back, I think.
Okay. I'm sorry for that. I have my point, or should I repeat that?
You should repeat it. I'm so very sorry, but I could not really figure out what you referred to.
So, no, it's my mistake, or not my mistake, but it seems like the internet connection here, although I'm in Finland, which is supposed to be really excellent, an internet connection. Okay. My point was, we were discussing the questions of how much impact and which kind of impact festivals actually have, and is it a challenge or is it a fortune? and looking on your Biennale concept, and also how do you deal with the Biennale, not as an biannual event, but something that continues and grows within 2 years and then showcases each second year. How do you feel the impact, if it exists, of the Biennale in Warsaw, and how is it related to your work, and are you critical about it also, or do you feel it as a challenge in terms of the community? That would be approximately,
yeah, I guess being like self-aware and self-critical is like one of the important like things we're dealing with, and like reflecting on what we've done and like what the real impact is something crucial for us. But I guess it's for all of us that way, if I'm not mistaken. That's true. We're dealing with quite a difficult socio-political situation, like on one hand, like the state, and on the other hand, with the city, and with the political profile of the authorities of both like state and the city. And I think this makes us feel that such activities as we are conducting could be even more important, like trying to create an alternative, which is not like, you know, this right-wing, very powerful cultural strategy, and neither the neoliberal cultural, you know, understanding of the role of culture, but another strategy, like another understanding of the role and mission of culture, of such institutions as ours, and like the way they could really be part of the public debates, and like be part of the activist movements as well, because this is also how we see ourselves, and maybe this is important in this context also of urban life, because we've been working a lot with activists, and one of the major points of the biennial in 2019 was creating the Polish Social Forum, involving activists working in different areas. And this is a group that we've been collaborating with since then, and part of our projects are involving them, but also involving their engagement. I mean, they are the people who are really telling us what themes they would like to work with. So I guess this is also like, important for us to acknowledge. And well, it's like the double-edged sword, this festival format. So I guess we're being aware of it, and this is why the format of the institution itself is the way you described.
Okay. I mean, I was also earlier asking shortly about, and you also reflected slightly about that, but like coming back a little bit, I would really like to pick that a little bit up also at that moment, coming back to the situation in Poland, and thinking about the impact that you possibly can have. Do you feel actually that with the activities that you are doing, that you really like also serve the community with opening the mind a little bit, or with reflecting in a different way? Is there some interaction? Is there a feedback that you receive? How do you feel about that?
Yes, there is a feedback we've been receiving. We have the impression that there is a community, or there are many communities that we've built around the biennial, around certain themes we think that are crucial, around certain ideas that we've been developing, around certain attitudes that seemed very important to us. So yeah, we have a feeling there's an impact in terms of like dialogue with the politicians, for instance, with whom we would be very happy to really have a conversation and introduce the themes onto such a level. It was not possible by now, but we're trying to do it. I mean, we're trying to like be an important voice in public debate, and hopefully we'll manage to like push through certain ideas, like step by step. because this like creating our future, like thinking about our future, designing our future is something that's like crucial for the whole of our thinking. So so this is how we want to see our role also, like being able to design together with people like the future would like to have and like the alternatives.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you very much. Are there any other feedbacks from you, from Guntas, Liana, from Kadri, from Inga to this issue? Otherwise, I would like to switch to the next subject that we could talk about. But you're welcome to give still some feedback. Okay. Then I think what also was very much in our minds when we were like developing this idea of all of this discussion, which I have been also a little bit already touching upon earlier in the afternoon, that we have to like probably also sometimes consider the size of our communities. So we have had actually also in the introduction text a very interesting notion of the idea of, is there a difference of this cultural work and arts and urban development in a small town or in a big city or agglomeration? Like last example was here Marta in Warsaw, which is certainly a real agglomeration. Then again, we have Kadri in Tartu, which is not really a small town, but nevertheless, it's a 100,000 city and certainly has a completely different dynamic. So can you feel out of your experiences any difference in that whenever you have had probably experiences also in different sizes of territories you were dealing with? I have to say at that point, it's quite sad because we had actually one speaker, also one participant who would represent more this character of a smaller town, who unfortunately couldn't join. So yeah, but maybe Kadri, you can like give a short reflection.
I think we lost you for a moment, but you're back. Yeah, I think you are.
Yeah.
A comment about organizing a festival in a smaller town? Yes?
Smaller town / medium-sized town. I mean, certainly Tartu is not a small town, but it is a medium-sized town, especially when we compare it with bigger countries in Europe, which have different sizes of cities and towns for sure.
It's difficult to compare because I have never organized anything in a really big city. Like the biggest city I've organized something was in Rotterdam. And comparing organizing Rotterdam to organizing something in Tartu was very different because I was not a local in Rotterdam. So every step was super difficult to make because I didn't have any connections. So I really started missing organizing in Tartu. I think it's the plus of organizing in a smaller city that you have like a very good structure. If you organize something for already at least 5 years, then you know basically everyone, you know so many people. And I think we lost you again. Lotta. Okay.
Keep going, we hear you.
Okay. You know so many people on whom you can rely on. I think this is the nicest part of organizing something in a smaller town, but maybe someone organizing in a bigger city would like to comment and then we can compare, because I don't have like this comparison in my professional life right now.
I have seen earlier that Guntas actually wanted to say something about that. Please, Guntas.
Yes, I didn't hear your ends of your question, but I understand you speak about thesis. Yes, Jonas. And in my opinion, I think in smaller cities is more about identity.
Mm-hmm.
And in bigger cities, more about diversity. You know, in Roskilde, for old generation, they ask, maybe they can picturing their reflections about how is cities looks in 70s. And they picture a tent, because in 70s Roskilde Festival is come. And it is like main thing for this city, yes. But in bigger cities, I think it is a lot of things what you can do, and it is less identity, is more diversity. And for instance, in Riga, it's a lot of actually contemporary art festivals like Survival Kit and Riboka, Kometa, Homo Novus, Photography Biennale, Sculpture Quadriennale, and Homo Novus, and all. And this is, I think, it is the main difference. And of course, again, it is a matter of money. If you have now a lot of money, you must be creative. And Cēsis is a very good example. If you compare Cēsis with other cities in this Vidzeme region, for instance, Valmiera and Sigulda, they are more rich cities, and for Cēsis, they have to be more creative, and therefore a lot of different contemporary art things is happening in this city because they are more open-minded. This is, I think, how is Cēsis doing, because art is not here today, but what I understand. And I hope they will be a capital of culture in 2000, I don't know in which year, but they are one of the pretenders.
Yeah, I agree with being open-minded, because I also have a strong feeling that it's much more easier to organize something in Tartu, for example, than in Tallinn, because Tartu is more like, Tartu identifies more as a student town, as a very liberal town. The city municipality is very open to experiments. Like I remember very clearly the first time ever I went to the city architect, and it was the first year of the festival, and I was a total no one, and I was asking like, may I organize a party under the biggest bridge? And he said, oh, go for it. So I'm not sure that this can happen in Tallinn, for example, or in bigger cities. I think it's like this, yeah, openness and readiness to experiment a bit more, because you're not the capital. You can like fool around a bit more and fail if necessary. You can try out a lot of things.
That's actually to have the idea that we can like fail, I don't know, but I mean, I think also it would be interesting to think about the idea of, do we have in a small town probably a better impact of that we are doing? So do we have a faster impact? Do we reach people in a faster way? Development mainly in small and medium-sized towns. Riga actually is a little bit the exception, to be very honest. Otherwise, I'm dealing with towns like where I'm right now, like Pori, a city of 85,000 inhabitants. And yes, I have, whenever we are doing something, we have had immediately the head of the planning department standing on the square and working with us. And it was self-understandable. You have a direct contact. You can act together.
Mm-hmm.
Only question is that probably sometimes more important to have the diversity, not only the diversity that Guntas was talking about of different festivals, but also the diversity in thinking. Sometimes we have people here that are kind of now sitting in Berlin, and Berlin in German saying always had like this philosophy of the Berlin air is something that is like free. That is like an old German saying, and maybe that is related also to the huge size and the huge diversity that it offers, that everybody can find a niche. And actually in a small town, sometimes you don't find your niche. So I think it's also interesting to look at it like that. And I would still like to have this question like out there. What do you think? Like, for example, Lena, how do you feel like that? Because Boldedai and Daugavpils are not immediately, and you don't really feel like you are in Riga when you are there. You are actually thinking you're an independent city because you're completely disconnected to the town. So how is it actually, like, how do you feel in those communities with the festival? Do you have a feeling that you are more close to the immediate environment?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, that's something that I wanted to pick up also on before, also this question of community. And I think that's also a huge learning point for us as a Cometa team over these years, is that I think, I mean, I can speak for myself, but just assuming that because it is a certain district with a certain history and there are all these kind of, I don't know, assumed identities, who speaks what language, how has the history looked. So to say, looking at this as a community, as this monolith thing is not actually what helps to do anything there, because it's actually very diverse within. There's different people there with different opinions, different political views, languages, needs. And I think that's also very often kind of a bit tricky situation of like, and especially when you do cultural work, artistic work within communities, assuming community as this monolith thing, but actually trying to unpack what's behind that. That's where it allows a space for transforming something and having a real interaction. And for us, the process in the 5 years has been very, I mean, gradually expanding to actually really trying to map and understand what are we entering, what's the socio-cultural, historical background here, what are the different things. And one of the, and the festival itself, I don't know if it has allowed us necessarily to do that work, but it has served as a platform from which there were things that were spinning off. So to say, we had one of my favorite things that happened in the last 1.5 years was an artist residency that kind of grew out of Cometa and happened in the neighborhoods and not in the fortress itself, where we kind of need to get the people in for us to have a discussion around, but actually going out in the neighborhoods and somehow outside of these walls of the fortress. And then we actually were able to slowly starting to see what the different stories are in this community, which is not like a block of things. It still consists of different individuals. And then to the other question of whether it's easier in like smaller towns or bigger cities, I don't necessarily have like a comment on that, but I was thinking with a related thought that's about the autonomy of the smaller towns. So to say how autonomous they are from the centralized government or the capital, so to say. And I just had this story in my head that I was reading, it was already half a year ago, like kind of the call for proposal for cultural projects for the Vidzeme region in Latvia, which is one region. And reading that call for proposals, I mean, you can just clearly see that people who are writing this call are sitting in Riga and have biases about what culture is supposed to be looking like in regions. So to say, let's give everything to traditional culture or cultural heritage or amateur collectives. And it's just this bias was so visible there. And then of course, what can happen in a smaller town in this case is very different than if the autonomy is there and the people actually have a voice in saying what kind of culture we want there, what kind of festivals we would like. And then still it's a challenge, but then it's still a different story if there's someone sitting in Riga and thinking that everyone in Cesis should just work with cultural heritage. And it's not that they shouldn't, but I don't know, it just caught my attention. There's also this question of who makes decisions for smaller or the bigger towns.
Thank you, Leona. That was really excellent. And I mean, I really can imagine this kind of idea and how it reads. And I think it's not the first time, and Latvia is certainly not the only country where things like this are happening. I mean, I have had similar experiences actually all over Europe in a way. The rural or the, say, like periphery is that where we expect only like folk dance and probably some kind of, I don't know, very traditional cultural understanding, which is, to be very honest, nothing bad at all. But nevertheless, it's that what we, out of our perspective, like really perceive to exist there. And only the big town is the town which actually brings up the, then also in this respect comes very fastly the high-end culture and those subjects which are like, what is high-end and what is this kind of culture? But I would like to shortly go over to Inga, because I mean, as I remember, also Survival Kit was actually running several projects during the last 11 years, time again and again, also running outside of Riga and also in smaller towns. Do you have any kind of experiences there at Hempstead, Inga?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Actually, it's true. We've had several collaborations. Like in 1 year, it would happen projects in other cities in Latvia. Then, of course, we've also had projects happening in neighborhoods, and also somehow, and then there was this kind of also conversation with the neighborhood activists from Sarkandaugava that were already doing things actively, and that I think is again this kind of collaboration when one is helping to amplify the voice to the other. So I don't know, we would give them the platform at Survival Kit, but they would kind of open the door towards that community that we had no idea about, and we had no, maybe means to actually reach in such a short time. And I think that's very important for Survival Kit, that we would always look for local partner, whenever we go. I mean, not maybe when we are kind of still within, let's say, center of Riga, but which is also, I think, a problematic thing, and we've tried to address it many times, this idea of center and periphery. And then who is your audience? Is it the community, local community, or many, diverse people who are forming the local community, or is it people coming that are the traditional art audience from the center, coming to for instance, Boldrai, or coming to Tesis for the Tasso Art Festival or something? That's another thing. But I think what we realized is really to try to somehow challenge all these binaries, let's say, and all these questions of scale, what is big, what is small, what is far, what is close. Because even when we did the festival for the first time in the other side of the river, and the river is such a psychological border, so I think the urban development and development of the city and kind of mapping of the countries, it's also such a psychological, political, it's a mix of things, how and why one place is considered to be far, whereas maybe the distance is not so far, you just need to cross the river, and that creates a problem. And in some other places, but you can go to the same distance but in the same side of the river, and it's still okay. Or how cities are different, let's say, what would be okay to do in Riga, that distance wouldn't be okay to do in Tesis. That would be certainly too far for people to go. Or if you compare Riga to New York, So I think it's just for every time you have to realize that you need to rethink your model, and there is no model that always works, and every city has this own psychology almost, I would say, and you have to somehow, or neighborhood or place, you have to familiarize with that a bit.
When each city has its own psychology, then probably also we have to handle each city and each territory, even if it's the smallest village or community, with the same sensitivity as we probably also would like to handle any human person. So, I mean, if we take it as a living organism, and I think we all agree that it is, then the question is then how much we actually can put on this small sensitive creature, on that what it is. So sometimes probably something can be also too much. This is a little bit going back again to the earlier question. Can we actually also do too much of culture and arts and activity within a community. But I think for the moment, I would really like to come to our next part, that we haven't looked really in this question so far, like make it then with you, because Warsaw certainly is the biggest city of all the cities being like currently in our discussion represented, although Liana and Elina are in Berlin, which is again double of Warsaw, but nevertheless you are actively involved in the work or the cultural work in Warsaw. But do you have any kind of feeling like that the impact that you actually feel in Warsaw differs from that what you could imagine? Probably you have no experience, but what you could imagine in a small town?
Well, I have the experience of working in another city in Poland, which is Łódź, which has a different dynamics for sure, and like different scale. But also the context was different, as it was like a kind of a different era, I would say, for the people organizing the festivals, like the era of big, events attracting audiences and being like the major focus for the city that wanted the festival to highlight it and to promote it. So this was it. So I guess that nowadays we're in a totally different situation, and it's like many conditions have changed. So it's a bit incomparable. But I guess we are located in the very city center as the Biennale Warszawa. We are easily accessible in terms of being in good communication with the city of Warsaw. So we organize our events there, but also the city of Warsaw is very polycentric, and we were trying very much to perceive it that way and have for some projects really focus our attention on the impact of the project within the neighborhood, not focusing on just big impacts in the whole city, because maybe it's not even possible at that scale. So maybe this was crucial when we were working in different areas and conducting different activities, taking into account also the what the areas are who really lives there, what are the specificities of the areas. Also trying to work with the communities and not to define what the communities are, and as was mentioned previously, and what they really want, and not also trying to define one community whose needs will be satisfied with any project. Yeah.
Thank you. But I really think that this is coming again back also to this of the community, in order to really be not. I'm coming back to Leona's earlier comments of being not too or possibly at all not being arrogant in its own perception and work, thinking that we as the ones who are doing something are the ones who really create the impact, and we are the ones who really make the change happen. In this respect also, it's for sure not very easy to understand whether, coming back to what you said earlier, Guntas, can really the artist be the driver of the change, or has the change, if necessarily there should be a change, that's also a big question. Has that more to come also from inside the community, less than from the artist or the cultural planner, the social planner? That's also a very tricky question. And I do know that, for example, in Berlin, this is already discussed for more than 20 years, if not longer, exactly that subject. And I would really like to shortly hear your feedback on that, Guntas.
I also want to say something on this afterwards.
Okay, please. Yeah, sure.
Okay, maybe quickly. I was thinking that in this question, for me, it comes back to what was mentioned already before, this notion of imagination, that it's not about artists necessarily showing what's the way or what should be done, but when we think about what are the needs in certain places, it's not that, I mean, so to say, even from my personal perspective as a human, if you ask me what my needs are 10 years ago, would have been a different answer because I didn't know what's possible. And now it's a different context of what I can actually ask for, both for myself, for the world, for the arts and cultural world, because you're growing. And I think what's the most potent role of festivals or artists in general is creating these spaces for imagination to grow. So to say, show that there's other possibilities of doing it. It's not about saying that this is the right way or this is the only way how it should be done, but at least creating the space where these seeds can grow for imagination within the communities, within the frames of that. And I think that's something that can and is actually feasibly done. And there's a lot of proof for that this is what is happening through especially cultural practices and festivals that are not just for showing off something or sitting in the self-righteousness of knowing all the good answers for the world, but that are actually engaging and encouraging participation and diversity of opinions to come together in one place and deal with this discomfort of the diversity of opinions coming in one place, which is of course uncomfortable, but I think that's where for me where the magic somehow happens, in this creating a space for imagining what else would be possible outside of what we know.
The magic, very good. Yeah, but Guntas, do you want to reflect or? Yeah.
Yes, I try after Liene. Liene did well, yes, because she's dealing with that, but for me it's more willingness probably. But if we remember start of our conversation, this contemporary or counterculture, it is more dealing with activism, and it is maybe more naturally is that they are driving of communities. I think it is matter of scale. Contemporary festivals, for instance, is more intimate. Is it a good word in English? I don't know. They are with smaller audience, and his audience is smaller. It is around them, and this interaction is more naturally based. If we speak about how they are leading in communities. This is, I think, and we can return to about impact in smaller cities, in smaller communities. Therefore, a lot of things happening in bigger town, in neighborhoods. And what I heard from one speaker in urban cultural planning, one of the conferences, that we must make a lot of villages in big town. For instance, we have 58 neighborhoods. It's 58 cents of villages, and in Riga, and probably in Warsaw and Berlin, with very, very polycentric cities, it is even more important. And this is, I think, it is how I see answer for your question.
Thank you. Anybody else who still actually has an interest to reflect on? Try to make a real turn now, and really try to bring in a very different subject that I find more increasingly important. Also, with the experience of doing several urban and cultural related projects during last years, I have been recognizing that we all together, and also the outside, let's call it like that, better and better really understands that actually culture does matter. And yes, cultural work and involvement in urban development matters, and that we really have an opportunity to do something with it. But then on the other hand, the recognition is very often far too small, and we have far too less opportunities, and I'm talking there really seriously, also financial. We are looking on how serious investors, for example, real estate investors and others, are taking, and how much subsidies they can receive, and how much opportunities are lying out there on the market for them, and how less recognition in economical and financial terms, and with that also in the ability, for example, to have as the cultural initiative, as Kadi was mentioning it, as actually everybody of you has said it, Leon was reflecting on the last 5 years in Kometa Festival, we do need time. Specifically when we are working with culture, time is one of the most essential issues to build trust and to really work with people. So when we do that, then we need also a certain financial backup. So I actually would like to bring in a little bit an experience here from Finland, where I'm right now sitting, and I was like asking colleagues, and the actual example here in Finland is quite amazing. I mean, a 2% of input in cultural terms and GDP creates an output of 4%. So that is a double. And why do we not more recognize that also as a significant tool for our process? That is a question that I have to all of you. For sure, I mean, I definitely don't have immediately an answer, and I think none of us has an immediate answer. But how could, or what could we do to make this voice also heard a little bit better, and also to get a better recognition of this? Open floor, please.
Yeah, but I think what we've done here in Latvia a lot, so there's this association of contemporary cultural NGOs, for instance, that is advocating for all the issues that are connected to these contemporary culture NGOs, but also to the, I don't know, like contracts of the artists or taxes or whatever a problem for this kind of NGO sector appears in the culture. They are there, you know, they're writing letters, they're lobbying to the Ministry of Culture, but also the Ministry of Finance. And so I think it's a lot of daily work of lobbying, which is also exhausting, of course, while you're just also doing your festivals and doing your other projects. But indeed, I guess there is no other way how to like make yourself heard unless you suddenly get like a socially democratic government that is just like amazing, like in Finland, that's or like Sweden, that just decided that they will give this and that amount of money to culture. So yeah, but and yeah, I think it's that kind of like tools that we have, we can use. And also like the languages are very different. I think indeed maybe we're not enough using the language of finances and somehow you know, benefits, and we're just talking more in relation to value and community and things like that. But of course, with the Ministry of Finance, like the other language and data may help differently.
Yeah, could add, I mean, I agree with Inga about the lobbying and the importance of that. And I also think that there needs to be like a bigger cultural shift of cultural paradigms of how actually arts and culture is understood, which is outside of the lobby. It's like, I mean, it's in any way about individuals making decisions in the end, and what's their kind of value system is. And a lot of that is also about not just lobbying, I think, in the governmental sense, which is important, but raising up the voice. And also, I mean, I've been part of that world for most of my life also until recently, of actually just, you know, just sucking up and working long hours for almost no pay, and just assuming that this is my mission in life and I don't deserve to eat and I don't deserve to know exactly where my rent comes from next month. And it's also, I think, about, and I think maybe that's like an inspiration from Berlin, where it's just people are also going for protests and demonstrating, even though culture is also fucked here. But at least there is this bringing these issues up. And I always felt in Latvia, we didn't talk about it. It kind of stays in the shoo in the organizations, or it's great that now there was the association where it was actually brought up on a more cross organizational level. And that's still a quite recent initiative for a few years, and still like in public, a lot of these narratives get just shushed away and not talking loudly enough, maybe. And I'm not saying that it should be now taken again by cultural practitioners who are already overworked and undervalued, yet thinking also maybe how to form alliances of talking about that also in public, and sharing this load of work, yet another one of actually contributing to the cultural shift in the people's minds also.
But maybe I add two more small things, like if we kind of finish to speak about Latvian situation. So another thing is that for years, Latvian Ministry of Culture has been under the National Union Party, which is a kind of very nationalistic party. And I think it's very important to mention that whenever we speak about Latvian cultural policy, because that if they would be allowed to, like this understanding of the culture would be very narrow. And that's why like so much of the resources are still given to this biggest of the festivals, which is the National Song and Dance Festival, which is kind of connected to keeping the traditional values. And also like, for instance, things like policy of integration is under this ministry. So there are certain things where it's maybe like difficult to introduce certain ideas even within our own like sector, like kind of vertically. But I really like what Liena says, and somehow in this kind of also this very utopian idea of introducing alliances with across certain disciplines, which we sometimes forget that we could, like really, because indeed if we only like ourselves think about questions like ecology or climate change, obviously it's maybe a bit narrow, but how can we speak together with, like, I don't know, the science community or someone from medical field or someone from other fields, and also acknowledging that there are other professions that are precarious, like teachers or doctors or something. So in different levels there could be different connections that I don't know how it is possible to like engage in them, but it's a possibility, I think.
I think it's really relevant, Inga, how you were putting this point, because on the one hand, very important to recognize that there is indeed political involvement that triggers a certain kind of development in the cultural process that we are actually dealing with. And the ministry, as an example, Latvia, has been held for many years by the National Alliance, and I mean, with this also like really triggering a certain concept and notion of culture within the country that is absolutely obvious and significant. And I just have to say very honestly, especially as a non-Latvian living in Latvia, I hear that far too seldom from Latvians, and I read it far too seldom in Latvian news. So I really would also think to have more cautious, and especially with the second issue that you were raising, as a social worker myself. I mean, that's the origin where I'm coming from. I studied it and I worked as a social worker in really not very easy districts and neighborhoods of Berlin. And to be very honest, yes, there are many professions in all of the countries, wherever we are looking to. Is is it Estonia? Is it Finland? Is it Germany? Is it Latvia? We have professions which are constantly underpaid and who probably not have to really like look for the next month's rent for the flat. Maybe it's not always that dramatic, but it doesn't need to be that dramatic. It's all about life quality also. I'm doing a hard job. I'm really trying to give something back to the community, and I need to have myself also a certain kind of quality in life in order to live. And we are not ready yet in high developed welfare societies to really accept that as a notion that we also need to have a certain income for those persons. So I'm really happy about what you just said. It really brings a serious added value to our discussion, because whatever we want to talk about, and however we want also to recognize that culture does actually also support a certain kind of urban development, not at least also not to talk about gentrification processes that we are probably also supporting with then again, real estate companies and institutions are actually gaining also something. I think this is something that we really, really have to focus far more on. I want to give in one example, but it's from 1999. It's already 20 years old, but I find it very, very relevant. And it's not immediately about arts, but it's about cultural work in terms of the Canadian Association of Librarians has actually measured the impact. It's very interesting. The Indian dollar given in a library is actually having an output in the community, in measurable output in growth of 4 Canadian dollars. So when you think about that, what does it actually mean that you give an investment in something like a library, which is probably not immediately something that we would immediately think as something that is really important at the first place as the cultural driver. But a library offers space, a library offers opportunities to meet on all levels in a very easy way and without barriers. It's not a school where the kid in the afternoon doesn't want to go to. A library is open-minded. There you don't have this kind of school barriers. So, I mean, those figures are actually giving us such an importance in all of this that I'm sometimes wondering, why don't we take that more serious? Not only we, but also the general society and the decision makers. So the question back to you all, why is there still such a significant and important part of our society?
Can I just drop this name there because of individualistic capitalism that tells you that all the care work, which is also culture and social work, is just non-essential? I mean, that's what I mean with shift of cultural paradigms. Of course, there are things that need to be right here and now on a very tangible level. But I mean, maybe I'm too radical in this space, or actually I don't care. I'm just like that. But I really think that until these kind of notions in the heads will not change, it will always be this struggle, and it will always require to play by the rules and try to adapt and try to prove that the $1 makes $4 instead of actually putting really acknowledging the value of that instead of having to play by the rules of proving the worth of culture by showing this. And while we are there, and I don't know, probably in my lifetime we will not get there, yet I think it's also important to push at these different walls, like what is right here and right now, and which is what was already mentioned, different tools, making alliances, lobbying. I don't know, there's a person here on this panel that is actually in the municipality and that gets this. So like making alliances with people like this, and at the same time also, I don't know, pushing the bigger walls in some ways. And that's where the festivals and the programs come in probably, and the artistic work of actually challenging these notions that make the basis for this kind of thinking. Otherwise we will always lose because, yeah, I don't know.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt in such an interesting moment. I just wanted to say that maybe we should slowly move towards conclusion, because we are a little bit over the time, which is okay, but I think we cannot be online too long, even though it's so interesting, but I just thought I had to say it. Yeah, sorry, I apologize,
okay,
Marta. Yeah.
Thank you for reminding us. Okay. Anyway, Marta, shortly, your feedback, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add up what Lina just said, that I would totally agree about the changing of the paradigm, not about like proving the value again and again, but what we were trying to do and what we will be like publishing Monday or Tuesday, I guess, is like inviting this economic think tank of young economists just to write a report for us, like to have this expertise that could be the basis of like us claiming like what could be done in terms of like financing culture and like changing this precarious position of the artists and cultural employees. So we asked them to write this report just to be the basis of our claims, but this is not about the value. This is not about like how much one Polish zloty put in culture can bring the value, how much value it can bring, but really what we can do and what are the means and where is the money we can really, which we could really use for culture. So I guess it's also important for us to have this kind of expertise in order to use it and to build the alliance on this basis.
Mm-hmm. So you're actually really asking for the expertise. I find that very important, actually, that we are mentioning it one more time, that also we need expertise that brings us actually to the forum of how do we continue all of this. Yeah,
think in the discussion in the public sphere, I guess this is what we have proven that it works, like having the the research and expertise which we can show and then circulate. That
sounds like a perfect actually ending. Thank you, Marta, for this issue. I would very much love, I hope you manage it. I really hope you manage it. I would very much love to throw the ball now back to you all. Elina so nicely reminded us that we do have only 13 minutes left. So I would love everybody of you to give like a very short final sentence, but really keep it as short and as crunchy as possible. I would be very happy about that. Something to finalize the evening/afternoon. It doesn't need to be like a real conclusion, just like your feedback. You're like after 1.5–1:45 minutes. What are your impressions? Guntas, maybe we start with you.
Okay. Impressions is very good, very nice company here with cultural and countercultural people. But what I would like to emphasize, maybe some misunderstanding was about this diversity in bigger cities. If we speak about contemporary art, festivals and movements, yes, of course, I agree that it's more not a variety of different festivals, is much more about multiculturality in the city, what these movements are bringing, especially in Riga, because Riga before wasn't multicultural. Riga was a two-cultural city, and now we can feel this multiculturality, this more diversity, it is exchange of knowledge, different artists and artist residents comes to the city, and city is became more metropolis, culture metropolis in this good words, I think. This is what I would like to, in final speak, to add from me. Thank you.
Thank you, Guntas. Lena?
I honestly don't have any, I think I took so much space already. Maybe just this, I'm grateful for this space and actually seeing also other people who are doing the very important work all over, and yeah, just thank you for this. I think it will still ruminate in my head what we were talking about.
I agree very much, yeah, something it will be. Marta, please.
Yeah, indeed, it's very difficult to kind of sum up. There were so many themes that we discussed, and also so many things to rethink for me as well. So I'm just very glad that we've met in this context and that I've learned more about your activities from you and like what's crucial for you in what you're doing, because this gives a different dimension to like looking then at the festivals you're organizing, the events you're organizing, and everything you're doing in your cities. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Marta. Yeah, Inga, please.
Yeah, thank you, Jonas, and thank you, Elina, and thank you again, all the participants. Really, it was a pleasure to speak with you. And I think, yeah, I just was looking at my bubble notes here, and indeed, it's quite a lot that. So one thing I would have liked to maybe explore more this what Comet is doing in the sense of like more than human or non-human and those kind of alliances and because that is something that seems like a futurity to me, you know, like how you think like beyond this human environment. But like from what we discussed, really, I think what stays is this kind of that most of the projects that we spoke about, like really certainly have this political dimension in how they are organized, in what their ideology is, and what kind of ideas they represent, and how they work. And but it's also important to save these spaces for experimentation, for the uncomfortable ideas, discussion, and the diversity which the festivals give. So yeah, I think it kind of wraps it all up for me.
Thank you very much, Inga. Kadri.
I also wanted to say that I'm very thankful that I met so many like-minded people, because I have to say sometimes I feel quite isolated. And now I would really love to visit all of your festivals, like really, really. Let's see what future will bring. And you are very welcome to visit Tartu and visit my festival. So let's be in contact.
Thank you so much, Kadri. I think actually all of us have this kind of feeling, including myself right now, that I would say like beyond all of the idea of everything that we are living with and living in the moment in the world, it would be just fantastic to actually, I have to say that, to sit in Riga where we were planned to sit, and after we finish the discussion, we have a chance to have a glass of wine or a beer or a coffee and just like relax and continue the talk. Because what I feel is impression now, before I'm giving a short conclusion also, my personal impression after this is very much based on the way that I feel once again in all of the years, but probably more significant than in many other times, I feel the urgent need of more common space for us, for the people who are actually dealing with this in an everyday life. And it doesn't matter from which angle we are coming, if it is the healthcare worker, is it somebody sitting in a decision-making position in a city council, or is it the festival, who are actually dealing with this kind of moment and with the situation. And we need to, in fact, really, we really need to, and I'm trying to make this shift now from my personal impression over also to a certain kind of a small conclusion that out, all of us, it is super important that we build alliances and that we have the opportunity to really be able to more create the commons for us and the commons for everybody, that we really work on that. And I think this is something that asks a lot of expertise from us, and it asks definitely a lot of sensitivity from us and the sense of community, not only the sense of community with the communities we are dealing with, but also the community that we are ourselves. And I think this is probably also a very important perception of myself of today, and a very important conclusion. Beyond that, I think one of the two most important issues were very much dealing with the question of, not the question, the idea of to have the experiment and to create actually also spaces that allow us the opportunity for these experiments, and not only us, but everybody involved and all the communities and all the places that we are in, having the opportunity to actually really like create this notion of imagination. And I would very much love to use it in the very end as a last word, to give us the opportunity not only to dream, but also to make dreams in a physical way for ourselves a little bit true, if it's only a tiny little bit per day, but something that sometimes helps ourselves to come this one step further on. Thank you very much, all of you being there, and also everybody outside there, those who have been listening to us or looking on us. I am, in the end, also have to say I'm really sorry for any kind of disturbances in the internet signal that I have had here in Finland. Yeah, quite a new experience for me to be in Finland and having problems with internet. But okay, let's stop that. The other point is that I'm really, really happy to have had you, the participants of the virtual and digital panel that we have had today. Guntas and Lena and Marta and Inga and Kadri, and most of all also I would like really to another time make a very big thanks to you, Elina, because you have had such a massive work before dealing with all of this. First of all, it was a physical environment, in a physical environment, then it was in a digital environment, or in both, and yeah, all of these shifts. So thank you very much for that work, and thanks one more time very much to the Riga Photo Biennale, because otherwise we haven't had the chance to actually talk about these issues. Yeah, and maybe for a very last word back to you, Elina. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
I want to say, I must agree that it was so interesting, and I think there came up at least topics for at least 12 another discussions, and I hope that we really can meet some other time, all of us or groups of us, and there's so much to discuss and reflect and share. But now we have to unfortunately finish because we have some limitations at this situation. But I want to say big thanks to Jonas for being a great moderator and for all the supporting conversations we've had. Thank you so much for all the participants for being so much there and sharing so much of your experience and insights. It was so interesting. And also I want to say quickly thank you to colleagues of Biennale who have also supported and helped a lot. Our technical support for patients as well, time-wise. And thank you so much for support from Association of Culture Institution of Riga City Council, Ādama Mickeviča Institute from Poland, and also MZ of Estonia in Riga, who have supported us in some other ways. So thank you so much, and hope to see you soon, sometime in some other space again, and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, and cheers.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.